Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our track session. For this session, we'll be diving into the world of contactless payment and figure out where security is delivering unimaginable possibilities in providing contactless payment. So, due to the pandemic, we all know that security has come to the fore, right? And so we all are preferring a more of a low touch, no touch model, and this is exactly where contactless payment comes in. And contactless payment as a new technology can only proliferate more when there's an element of security into it. In today's day and age, every transaction has been, leveraging some degree of contactlessness. Let it be your QR payments, your card payments, or your mobile tap and pay. For further elaborating and getting rich content into what the ecosystem is entailing, I would like to start off the session, and I would like to introduce our panelist. uh, Mr. G.M. Giridhar would be the moderator of the session. He is chief of offline product operations and technology in NPCI. And we have our esteemed panel members, Mr. KK Mukhi, who is the founder of Network Intelligence. And along with him, we have Mr. Sujay Vasudevan, who is Vice President of Cyber Intelligence Solutions, South Asia, MasterCard. Yeah, we have Mr. Sujay, we have Mr. Giridharan, and Mr. Mukhi. Mr. Giridhar, I'll request you to take over the session. And in the meanwhile, after that, everyone can give a brief introduction of themselves. So, just to set the context. Uh, Thank you so much. Over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Giridhar. I work for NPCA for the last 10 years in various areas. I primarily take care of offline operations, product operations, and technology. That's what my background. I think in the current pandemic scenario, I don't think any other interesting topic than contactless payments, right? So with India having more than 830 million debit cards and almost 60 million credit cards, and there are 760 million mobile users, I think it's the right time for us to further the cause of contactless payments to also look at the government of India's ambitious target of 40 billion transactions target for this year. If we look at the POS terminals, there are 5 million POS terminals, and also mobile by itself is becoming a great instrument for carrying out the payments, be it UPI or mobile. There are technologies where we are looking at mobile can be used for tap and go. So it, all these small payments which can be handled through self payment mechanism, I think this is the best opportunity for us to push this cause further. So with this, I request my co-panelists to give their opening remarks before we enter the discussion.
Yeah, sure. I can go first. Thanks, Giridhar, for that. And rightfully said, I think the move towards contactless has been accelerated by the pandemic. I think people were more safe, felt more safe using a contactless terminal versus dipping and putting the pin in. E-commerce boomed thanks to limited restriction and movement and getting things delivered to home. And the real shift, which I think has been in the digital space, in the phygital space, because personal experience. There are large retailers today where I go ahead, I purchase what I want, I scan my barcode in the app, and I make the payments through the app. So there's absolutely no contact with anybody else, even though I'm in the physical space. So that phygital has really come to life over the last few months, and really sets the tone for what payments look like in the future. And from our perspective, I think the future of payments is going to be fairly different. I think payments are going to be contextual. Payments are going to be invisible. And by what I mean by that is, if you look at if you travel outside India and use an Uber, you have got your or Grab. If you go to Singapore, you've already set up your card on the app. You go ahead, get into the car, get your destination, get out, and walk away. You don't do the payment because the payment happens, in a really invisible way. And I think that's what's really the future of payments. How do we ensure that the customer really doesn't have to. No customer wakes up to say, I'm going to make a payment today. The customer says, yes, I want to buy this, I want to do this, and those kind of things. How do you integrate payments so that the person who's providing that service has got an assurance that he gets paid for that service, he gets remunerated for the service. The customer knows that I don't have to go through a real process as such to make that payment. And at the same time, there's a lot of security built into it so that I know that my money is safe. And nobody else is going to get access to my money. I think all these things really starting to come together, and contactless has been a great enabler in over the last few months, and I think we would see a lot more of that coming in the near future as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Sujay, for that. Can I move to Mr. Mukhi?
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, my panelists, co-panelists, Giridhar, Sujay. So I think in terms of the transformation, we heard Mrs. Vedashri, for example, saying that the level of what demonetization could not achieve, this pandemic has achieved. I mean, we should not be so optimistic and get silver linings, but this is definitely one silver lining to this very gray cloud of the pandemic. I remember that when we were at the core of the lockdown last year, and there were some NGOs that were working to help people that were out of work or out of food, get access to basic ration and food like that. And it was restricted on how you could even transport it. So that the digital payments was a game changer over there, because the NGOs were simply online transferring the money to a local kirana store, and the affected people, migrants, laborers, could simply go and access whatever food packets or food articles that had been procured for them. So there's been these very strange ways in which, and strange and interesting, and I would say game-changing ways in which contactless payments have come through. But when a situation like what has happened a couple of weeks back, MobiKwik, it kind of brings to light the fact that wherever there is large volumes of personal data, sensitive data, hackers will always be there. And therefore, this brings to us massively the concerns of security and privacy, both being overlapping but clearly different aspects of data. Now, India unfortunately has lagged on the privacy front, though I would say on the security front we've done quite a bit, because RBI, I think since 2008 is when they came out with the Gopal Krishna Committee report, and then they came out with the cybersecurity framework in 2014 or 2015. So I would lump the ecosystem like two ends of a dumbbell. So you have banks on one side that are extremely paranoid about data. They have invested massively in terms of data protection, and then you have a lot of the other ecosystem players that sometimes don't really understand cybersecurity the way at the level at which they should. A lot of conversations that we have with fintech startups, the first mention of cybersecurity or data protection that happens is when they start talking to somebody like NPCI or Visa, MasterCard, or a bank, and then they get a PCI checklist, or they get a RBI checklist, and then they say, oh, we had to comply to all of this. We have to encrypt all of this data. We should not be storing 16 digits. So it's all very new to them, and that's when they are actually going to market, right? They've developed the product, they've designed the architecture, they've implemented stuff on the cloud, and then they're having to kind of retrofit security on top of that. Banks have actually done that journey over the last 10, 15 years. And so there we see a completely different mindset. The minute they think new product, the minute they think new service, cybersecurity is there. So unfortunately, we're like kind of living in these two different realities, and till the other ecosystem, which is the non-banking ecosystem, which is thriving today, also starts to come to the level of maturity of banking, I think cybersecurity incidents will continue to happen. And this is what brings me to the other area of concern, which is that when we talk about privacy, India really has a very unfortunately a bit of a poor track record when it comes to protecting users' private data. And this is becoming a bit more of an issue the more we delay passing of the Indian Privacy Act. So while we've seen big ticket breaches happen, we haven't seen the repercussions that you would typically see in the EU or in the US, where there would be fines and penalties and congressional hearings and what have you, right? It would be like big, massive news, and until the organization was shown the mirror, they would not be let go so easily. So I think we will get there, and here is where I really appreciate the role of the regulators. I've seen whether it's RBI or NPCI or certain, they've brought in a lot that, for example, when we talk about chip and pin, right? India was one of the first countries to move to chip and pin. The US moved a couple of years back, or started to move a couple of years back. And when we talk about contactless, for example, RBI has, I think, a 2,000 rupee limit per transaction. OTPs are enforced. So these are all massively mitigating measures that, as an end user, I do get comfort from the transaction processing channels, that my data is secured. The challenge is when there's massive amounts of data stored with one of the any of the players in the entire ecosystem, then obviously they become a target for attackers. So I think that's kind of some of the thoughts, maybe not very structured, but those are some of the thoughts that I have on how things are progressing right now. Sorry, Mr. Girdhar, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you for the elaborate detailing on the security aspects. Now, if you look at the payments per se, digital payments per se is on the rise, obviously. And if you look at the reach, if you go to the small kirana merchant, you go to a vegetable vendor, everywhere the payments are being accepted. They're ready to accept. And I thought the QR code is a real revolution. Right now, you need not share your even VPA. You need not share. You can pay and move. So that's how it has been. What do you think that which areas the uptake will be much faster in terms of contactless payments?
I don't think there's any limiting factor on contact payments. I mean, RBI has recently raised that 2,000 limit to 5,000, and I think that really increases the number of transactions which can really go with contactless, and I think that's really the big. If you're talking about contactless digital, then I think the reach is far more, because now you're no longer, as you said, QR. It could be even a non-merchant P2P space, where you really don't need to come onto a formal merchant to really start accepting digital payments, and you can have collect requests as well, which can fulfill that requirements. So I think the incentive which is there for people to move to contactless is really has been provided. The use cases have been developed, and I think there are even more use cases which most of those fintechs who are working today are working on more and more. In terms of the entire space around financial inclusion, I think is an area which can be brought in, where you can have disbursement into an instrument which then can be used and digitally. I think that's something which can really work out. And obviously, how do we look at enabling right down to
I think
network issues.
Yeah. So now the network issue is one of the dampeners on the bank. Network issues are one of the dampeners on the online digital payments, right? So there are many form factors that are coming up in the contactless payment space. The stored value cards, where You can store the value on the card itself, or the communication can happen locally. You not necessarily go back online and check with the bank, and that can be handled. And there are other methods like sound and IVR based techniques. There is voice recognition that is also being worked out. I just saw this in one of the reports of PwC. This is one of the form factors that are coming up, and also the SIM overlay, where in case of USSD it is only covering the GSM, right? But in case of SIM overlay, it covers LTE as well. Therefore, it will have a wider range. I'm not sure Sujay has joined back. So in the meantime, let me come to you. The consumer behavior or the user behavior. For example, when I go to a shop, I see them, even if the card is contactless, they take the card and they want to do the touch rather than the customer doing it, and customers are also willingly giving the code to them. Some time back in my one of my visits to US, where I saw for entering pin, they've got two terminals. One is with the merchant, the other is with the customer. So the merchant himself cannot see what the customer is entering. That is the level they have gone to. Here it is not the case. Now, with this level of sharing the device to, or the instrument to the other person or the merchant, how do we change the customer behavior? What should be done? Because it's any general public, right? Not everybody is well educated on the risks involved.
Yeah, I think there are two angles that you referred to. One is NFC, where people, though as Sujay was saying, the transaction limit is gone from 2,000 to 5,000. Still, people will give over the card, and very often, I have to tell the merchant that this you can just tap. You don't have to put the card in and then I ask me for the PIN. Right, this transaction will go through just on tap, because I can see the NFC icon on the payment machine. But so merchants also are not aware of NFC. That's one. Second is what you said. Like in the US, the most of the card machines are on a swivel, so they just as soon as they finish the cash, the billing register thing, they just turn the machine over to you, and then you put your card in, you put in the PIN, and then you pull out the slip. So I've never seen that happen in India. I've never seen a merchant have that sort of a setup where, like, some of the stores have the swivel thing. So I think it's both ways, right? I think merchants also need to be explained what NFC is, and NFC can be used. There, I think maybe at some level, I'm not sure, I'm speculating, but maybe banks and RBI have felt that NFC is not something they want to promote aggressively, so they haven't evangelized it. Like, I don't see the kind of user awareness or user evangelistic kind of videos or social media messaging that happens on other aspects of online payments. So there, I think the whole idea of what NFC is and it's on tap and things like that understanding is not there. And yeah, I mean, user behavior is the most difficult thing to change, right? I think maybe the battle is better fought. What we have seen successfully, right, when it comes to things like cybersecurity, it's basically NPCI, RBI, the banks that have pushed the merchants, and then the merchants have pushed the payment processors, and payment processors have pushed the third-party service providers, where somebody who's even running a call center is now guided by RBI's guidelines and PCI guidelines, right? So I think if we have to push user behavior, probably a better mechanism is from the central ecosystem through to the banks, to the merchants, and then automatically change the user behavior.
Sujay, when you were away, we were talking about having the customer behavior, how it can change, because right now we see in any store, the card, or even it's a physical card being used for contactless, the cards being exchanged still. The tap is being done by the merchant rather than by the customer. So how do we change the behavior? Was what we were trying to discuss. From the regulatory standpoint, no, there are a lot of initiatives taken by RBI. RBI enhanced the limit from 2,000 to 5,000, and also for standing instruction, they have allowed from 2,000 to 5,000, right? And the NCMC is being promoted everywhere. NETC is being done, right? So we have that channel as well. and it is being done in the airports right now. In Delhi Metro is one of them which has adopted. We are looking at having smart cities in place. However, no, we need to look at for any form factor to be successful or any payment channel to be successful, the acceptance ecosystem should be very strong, right? So if I have a
Yeah.
say contactless or a card I use, I want to use a tap and go, and if it is if it's accepted some places, not accepted in another place, then change for the customer, right? You do it here, you don't do it here. So how do we get that space? What is important is to get everybody to accept this mechanism, right? So a lot of places to
So
cover.
I
How
think,
do we do that?
yeah. Um, well, I'm just going to quote personal experience on a couple of things, right? So I was traveling um, in one of the Eastern European countries, which has got probably one of the highest contactless penetrations in the world, right? And this was before I had my India contactless card. It was a chip card, it was a chip and pin card, and I would take my card out, and the terminal was facing me, and they would say, tap. And a couple of them even they put it in such boxes where the chip was working, because there it was, every card which came into that merchant was a contactless card. And so that they figured out that yes, just keep the terminal there, the amount goes in through this thing and it does gets done. uh, Cut over a couple of years later, I'm using a contactless card in India, and I go to a merchant and I give my card. I said, I want to tap it myself. He said, no, sir, give me the card. I want to put it in a chip. I said, why don't you using contactless? He said 1 in 10 cards are working, sir. 9 out of 10 are not even going through. So, one is, of course, the behavior has to change from the merchant side. But then you also need to give the confidence to the merchant that, this is a payment instrument that will work. If you are going to have, if once every customer comes in, a large number of customers come in with a contactless card, which is enabled for contactless, and they see that, 80% of the transactions are going through contactless, then the behavior change happens. And I think that's where we need to make sure, we're balancing out what we want to promote and the regulation around it, the customer convenience around it. And I think it's a journey. It's not something which will happen overnight. But yeah, to a large extent, it's a merchant behavior which coaching which needs to come through.
Yeah, see, from maybe I would like to give our efforts in making this happen. So we have on a debit card, we have 23 banks participating on contactless, and on credit card, 4 banks right now. Certification is going on. So we have got around 21 million cards issued on contactless as of now, RuPay cards. So the terminals are RuPay enabled, or 10 lakh, sorry, 1 million terminals are enabled. See, when we talk about online, when we say that contactless or any digital payment per se, the customer, the failure rate is very low. Fairly, then it's all good performance. But when there is a issue, actually the customer becomes contactless in the sense that you don't know where to go, you don't know whom to approach. So that is where the trust in the payment mechanism will not be there. For example, if I have cash,
No,
it's a
absolutely.
straight case, give the cash and I'm done with. I have a card. Let me tell you, on the card, next day comes card. The failure, my personal experience, very, very rarely I have seen. Even if there is a failure, the reversal happens just like that. But it's not the case right now in the online payments. So the what the customer should do, what the ecosystem can do. One thing I would like to add before I hand it over to you. If you look at the effort from regulator has mandated that the online dispute resolution system should be there, where the end customer himself can raise, and it should be rule based, automated. Where if there is a reversal to happen, it should happen. But still, it is some time away, right? Right now, if you miss a payment and it goes into deemed accepted mode, it takes a day or two to get settled. So, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sorry, I'm hearing a little bit of crosstalk. I don't know if that's just me or if you can hear it as well.
We are also. Yeah, it's gone now. It's gone now.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, okay, perfect. Um, Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. It is imperative that the only surety of a physical cash is that when I take my cash and I give it to you, you know that you have got the cash in your hand, right? Um, that surety, if you want to move it into the digital space, and when I say digital, it's both electronic payments as well as payments over the net. How do you really ensure that? And I think yes, we have made massive strides, but as long as the failure rate is even 1 out of 1 million, the surety of cash is never going to be there, right? And it's interesting, right? So because you have cases where it's a product and it's a service. Now, it's a product is simple because yeah, your transaction doesn't go through. I don't give you the product, but service is typically paid after it. So you stay in a hotel, you try and check out. You go eat at a restaurant, and you're trying to pay at the end of it. The moment of truth for the merchant is there. Is that point? Is that when a customer tries to pay digitally, when a customer tries to do a card through a mobile, that transaction needs to go through. And I think anything less than 100% is an issue, right? Of course, you're going to have issues where customer doesn't really have the money. I mean, so be it. He wouldn't have the cash either. So I think those risks are always there. But uptimes in terms of ability to settle immediately, all those things become extremely critical.
Yeah, even just to add, even in case of offline payments, right? Even if it is assuming that the connectivity issues does not creep in and the offline payments, you can still do it. But there is a possibility of a failure, and when there is a failure, again the syncing up back into the original, what is the in your bank account and what is the balance on the card, is also going to be a challenge, even if that is going to come into play, right? So that is one. And then no, on the transaction, what I would like to say is the merchant payments. When you book something online and the delivery does not happen properly in terms of the goods not in order and all, and the digital payment is done not on cash on delivery, that is also one area of concern where we have challenges for the customers, right? Merchants don't pay back, and obviously the dispute mechanism will come into play, and it takes longer time for uh, people to do this.
Yeah.
And coming back to Muki on the security aspect, right? So I'm not sure this. I have seen some video on this saying, so if you have got a contactless card and someone comes and puts the machine close to it and still get the payment through. So how do we look at this? You're on mute, it seems.
I think when we talk about RFID enabled or NFC based transactions, payment instruments, that risk is always there because if an attacker is somehow able to bring a reading device close to the card, and that's where the transaction limit helps. And that's where the dispute redressal system or grievance system, the RBI ombudsmanship, whatever, all that mechanisms that are there, those can definitely help. Strong KYC goes a long way because, at the end of the day, the transaction has to hit somebody else on the other side. And who that other person is, if that is visible, again, the fraudsters can be caught. So I think in that sense, from a consumer perspective, I would say we are in good shape. A lot of people, when I speak at any conference, they say, is it safe to transact online? Is it safe to have an NFC enabled card? And I say it's safer here in India than anywhere else in the world. Right? I have had my card get misused, and I have had the bank refund that money. I've been through that experience. So it can happen to any of us, and but the way the ecosystem has been set up, it's very customer focused. It's not bank friendly. It's more end user friendly. So that's appreciable. The gap that I see, as I said earlier, also is the payment service providers, the payment processors, payment gateways, etc. All of these other organizations, these new fintech startups, maybe even the new banks that will get licenses. how serious are they about data protection? How serious are they about the end user privacy aspect? And privacy talks a lot more about than just protecting the data, right? I have to take user consent. I have to give the user the right to change that data, delete that data, so on and so forth. I have to be transparent about which other third parties I share that information with, and that with all the multinationals that are coming into India and the ownership structure of Indian so-called Indian companies themselves, we don't know who really is the true shareholder behind it. So there's clearly a lot of, and that's why it prompted RBI to come with the data localization piece, right? But when all of these organizations hoover in data or metadata, as they like to call it, right, they'll say we're not capturing all the transaction details, but they'll capture the behavior aspect of the user, and then use that to cross sell, upsell their other services and products. I think that's a big risky area that we are entering into. For example, I'm not picking on any particular organization, but any of them, right? If whether it's Paytm, MobiKwik, all of them, any of them. Let's say I'm transacting with them. Now, who on the other side has access to my data, not just within that particular payment wallet company, but their partners, their affiliates, their service providers, and what are they allowed to do with all of that data? That level of transparency, I don't think exists anywhere. For example, if I use Google Pay, WhatsApp Pay, Amazon Pay, I'm not, as I said, I'm not commenting on a particular organization, but I'm saying as an end user, what level of assurance or visibility do I have as to how my data is being stored, processed, transmitted, and not only with the organization that I'm using for payment processing, but with their partners and affiliates on the other side. So that's, I think, a big concern. And just one more point. Yes, Sujay, just sorry. One more point I want to add is, as I said, a lot of these fintech companies, startups, they learn about cybersecurity the minute they bring the product to market, and that's a bit late in the game, right? You don't want to bolt on security. You want security to be there by design. You don't want them to learn PCI requirements and RBI cybersecurity framework requirements when their product is baked and ready to be delivered to the market. You want them to build that in at the start. Now, for that, again, many organizations are doing many good things. I know NPCI, for example, has this very thriving mechanism where it promotes new players and incubates players and address and informs them about PCI and RBI requirements. But that same thing needs to spread much wider. We need to get to startups much earlier in their life cycle and tell them that security is a game changer. If it can in fact be a complete the number one USP when they go to market. Like if 5 companies come with the same product to, let's say, HDFC Bank, and one of those companies says I'm PCI compliant from the get-go, I'm RBI compliant from the get-go, you should see what impact it would make at the HDFC Bank end, right? Because HDFC Bank is going to hit them with a 200-point checklist on security, which they'll be compliant with from the minute of the first conversation. That can be a complete game changer for startups once they realize that security can be an enabler and not something that they have to now try and bolt on to their architecture late in the day. So those were my 2 key submissions.
Yeah, I mean, like to take your for so as far as digital giants are concerned, right? And I think you're right about them using metadata, but I think in terms of privacy, they do understand, the kind of repercussions they can face on the privacy angle. So they do take it a lot more serious. I mean, just a case in point is what happened with WhatsApp earlier this year. And the repercussions that were there, but I do see your point, and I would also echo it, that security by design, even for the smaller guys, even for the smaller fintechs, it has to be by design and not as an afterthought. And there's no dearth of you know technology available that to help them be secure. It's just that the intent needs to be that is to use the right technology, use data wisely, use metadata as much as possible. And I think typical any AI engine will always look at metadata. They'll anonymize it for the sake of removing any bias. So I think that's fundamental with any AI. But it is a intent to make sure that you're secure. intend that you use your data responsibly. And I think the point which you made a while back is very, very critical. And I think um, is there has to be some kind of repercussion for non-compliance. And unless that starts coming in, like how EU does it or anyone else, there's going to be the non-compliance levels are still going to be as high as they are. Because if there's no fear of repercussion, then you just go with whatever is the easiest way out that you find. Right? So I think from a policy level, that's really important. Maybe from an NPCI regulator level, really look at how how to bring those in, how to bring in stringent controls, which I think the regulator's done well. But how do you also look at creating a fear of not being compliant, and it's not just smaller fines or fines based on your size, but it needs to be crippling enough for businesses to take it seriously. Right. And I think that's something we're seeing it happen. You would know some of the larger banks have faced some pretty stringent repercussions recently. But I think that's the next real factor coming in, is to really make sure that all organizations, small and big, in the payment space, handling data, handling information, handling private data, know that they could be crippling consequences if they do not protect that information, or if they misuse that information.
Absolutely.
So the payments are moving from the old-fashioned cards and mobile. Now it's all moving to wearable devices as well, right? So any thoughts on that?
It's the most secure form factor to a large extent. I think the weakest link today is the individual behind the form factor, rather than the form factor, right? If you look at what are the most of the frauds which are happening today, most of the risks which are happening today are human errors, are social engineering frauds. It's people giving away their credentials, downloading malware, those kind of things. I think, yes, from your offline space of a physical plastic, a lot of that security is built into the plastic. So if I take that plastic, I try and copy it onto another plastic, and I try using it, it'll not go through because the agent of the issuer is on that plastic. Digital that way has got a little bit of scope of someone trying to get hold of information and all that. And I think that will evolve. There are, as I said, there are technologies which help prevent that kind of fraud. There are technologies which help identify that a particular device is compromised, or there is you can use AI to identify whether there's a risk on that transaction. But yeah, there is a cost factor to it. So I think those market dynamics will start catching up at some point in time to say, yes, it is something we need to spend money on to make sure we don't lose money. And that's something which the market will balance over time.
I had just had a thought. If anytime, if I have the capability to activate the any form factor at some point in time, maybe using my iris or using my voice, and therefore I will never have the risk of my losing my device where now it is only tap and go, anybody can use it. But if I'm having the capability to use what I have and then activate the card and deactivate it at that point in time, how it will be?
Yeah, I think biometric as a form factor is pretty good, right? As long as I think the weakest link, or as I say in a biometrics, is obviously the device which you're collecting it on, and you're completely putting your entire trust in that iris scanner on your phone, the fingerprint scanner on your phone, and you're assuming that cannot be hacked. I think that's the as long as we're able to secure those elements where you're collecting it. I think it's a great thing. The other fact, that's something which today looks very secure, with technology coming in, and I'm sure Mr. Moki can put in a lot more information on how these biometric scanners also can be compromised. It's just a matter of time as well.
Yeah, I think we're left with 4 minutes. Let us do closing remarks from both of you.
Yeah, on this, sorry, on the biometric authentication, I'm just reminded of that story, where this couple was in the aeroplane and the wife discovered the husband is having an affair while he was sleeping, and she used his, you know, fingerprint to unlock his iPhone and go through his messages. So I'm imagining, my kids buying stuff online while I'm taking a nap by gently placing my finger on the device. But yeah, absolutely right. This is really human-based flaws and errors. Yeah, Sujay, please feel free to go ahead with closing remarks.
No, I think obviously digital is here to stay. There's no doubt about it. I just hope we don't. Um, you know, we made tremendous strides in terms of going digital, but the trust in that payment, the trust in the ecosystem needs to be kept high. That requires effort. That requires investments in making sure we're secure. Um, open the doors, make more payments go digital, keep it secure, use technology to keep it secure, and just keep that trust. Because once we lose that trust, we're just going to roll back to a cash economy, and I think that's what we really have to be careful about.
I think we've not only has India come a long, long way in terms of digital contactless payments. The ecosystem has done a great job. The government has done a great job. Peers have done a fantastic job. At the same time, I believe security as well. We've made massive progress over there. I give credit to RBI for being very forward-looking. Whether it was chip and pin, or it was OTP for all online transactions, or IVR transactions, transaction limits on NFC. They've always come with a risk-bearing, risk-controlling mechanism as they promote the online space. So that's been a very forward-looking vision, and that gives comfort to the common person that transactions online are safe. I think once we get the privacy law in place, which will bring with it the necessary repercussions for breaches, I think we would have made fantastic progress.
Thank you, Sujay and Maki. My take is, we are all poised for a great growth with the more NUs coming into play. The licenses will be up anytime. So new methods of payment, new opportunities. Obviously, new challenges will be there. The blocks of the security, information security, and the personal data, and also the ecosystem compliance. That's what we spoke about. This is on one side, and we are also in the need of having a comprehensive dispute or grievance redressal mechanism. If these two can be worked out very well, I think we are poised for a great growth in the digital space. Thank you for both of you for your contribution.
Thank you everyone for your valuable points and really getting the insights around contactless payment. Mr. Giridhar, Mr. Sujay, and Mr. KK Mukhi, it was really a pleasure having you on the panel. Really, thank you so much. And for the audience, I would request you to hold